What's up, everybody? Today on Make It Cozy, I'm going to tell you how I acquired my massive tools and how I did so on a budget. Just getting started. If it's your first time here, hopefully this will give you some good resources. Let's check it out. So let's say you're starting out with this passion, right? You have an idea in your head. I want to be a cabinet maker. I want to start a 3D printing business. I want to be a blacksmith. And you're like, taking a class, you got a maker space, you got your feet wet somehow, and you want to do it yourself. You want to do it in your own shop. Now, there's a couple of restrictions that you might have. One of them might be how much space you have for your own shop. Me, I use my garage. I got another video about that on how to utilize my maximum space, so give that a look if you would be so kind. The other thing is, though, is taking the budget to start, right? That can be very, very intimidating for some folks. So I'm going to tell you how I got started with my budget maker routine. Not that I'm in financial planning, I just try to make stuff on a budget. So the first thing that you want to do is to get some simple tools just to get your feet wet, right? Just to see if you like the hobby and if this is something that you actually do want to pursue. Me, myself, the first two things that I got, circ saw and a sander. Now I got those bad boys for like 20 bucks each, which isn't a big deal for me, right? 20 bucks, 40 bucks for both of them, I could take that loss, right? I could sell those back if I don't really like it. Now, granted, I'm probably not going to get my full 40 back, but you know what? That is what it is. At least you're not spending like 300 bucks on a new 3D printer or a table saw, and you're like, I just can't get it. I don't like this. I don't have the time. I'm in the military and I have to move all the time. Or whatever the case may be, right? You might fall out of it, and that's okay. But as long as you try, that's what's up, right? So that's pretty nice. All right, so that's step number one, right? Start simple. Start easy, don't break the bank, right? You want to get your feet wet first to make sure that you're going to be passionate about what you're doing. But now you feel like you got a good handle on it. You've been making some stuff or storing some furniture, whatever the case may be. And now you're like, I'm prepared to make that dive into a little bit deeper into my budget. All right, so let me preface this next part by saying that if you're going to buy your tools brand new, this is all a moot point. So me personally, the only thing that I'm buying brand new is either going to be like some sort of power tool or something small. Like let's say the sander that I talked about earlier. That's 20 bucks, no big deal. I can do that. But these machines that you see behind me, these are all bought secondhand. And with a little bit of research, they can be, in my opinion, as good as just buying brand new. Especially nowadays when some of the stuff is made out of plastic anyways. But let's talk about my first thing, is that let's say I'm going to use this table saw as the example. So let's say I have a source and they're trying to sell this table saw for a really good price. First bit of research that I do is to look up the model number. Now you can plug in, right, if you know that it's a Rockwell Delta table saw, you can try to look at the different image searches, find something that looks in particular to what you're talking about, and then get that model number. Next thing I do is I take that model number and I plug it into a forum. So in this example, we're talking about woodworking forums. So the thing that I like about the woodworking forums is that they'll tell you a lot of problems, they'll tell you a lot of solutions. So let's talk about the negative first, because it might save you a lot of heartache in the long run. They'll say that the motor is burnt out, super fast, it breaks a lot, plastic pieces, it's not worth it, set it on fire, right? That way, you're done at this point, right? You've saved yourself a lot of the heartache. It might be discouraging because the price was right, but if it's going to be more work than it's worth, forget it. I'll say forget it at this point. But let's say that the negatives aren't so bad, and also you can try to find some solutions as well, right? So the problem with this table saw is that the blade would drift down for a higher cut. So looking at the woodworking forums, they just said, oh, just put a clamp on it.
Don't need to worry about that. It's all clamped up.
And I experienced that same problem. The blade still drifts a little bit. I can adjust for that. Is it a pain? Yeah. But can I live with it? Absolutely, for this price. Another thing that you want to do a little bit of research on is getting yourself a tech manual. So I always go through and find these online, and generally they're free. There hasn't been one that I haven't found for free yet. And unless you're a collector, I wouldn't even bother looking for the tech manual on eBay. Because yeah, you might find one for 99 cents, but in my opinion, free is always better. Especially for the dudes who are like, vintage tech manual, and it's clearly reproduced from like printer paper for 30 bucks. And I'm like, you gotta be out of your mind. This guy from 1967, right? I like the older stuff, personally, because I feel like it's gonna last longer, but again, I'm also doing this on a budget, so it's secondhand. It's gonna be old. But the point of the story is that I like to go to these guys to see if some of the reproducible parts are actually still reproduced. So for example, as soon as I got this guy, I had a problem with the tilt clamp. I think I might have mentioned this in my apothecary cabinet build, but the tilt clamp for this machine was made out of plastic and the threads broke. So in particular, I'm talking about 135 right here behind the front carriage assembly. there's the model number, and it's plastic. It broke, right? Past Cozy gave me that information. So this is where doing a little bit of research beforehand would really save myself a little bit of heartache. I just got lucky. So the piece was broken. Had I known to look for it, it would have been discouraging to go to that dude's house, be prepared to hand him money, and be like, nope, this thing is broken. I'm sorry, I gotta walk away. However, and the fact that I was lucky is that I found a dude online who sold this guy for super cheap. And it's made out of aluminum. So I was able to replace it. Again, though, I just got lucky. It might be different if you're reaching out to like an actual machine shop business and they want to reproduce this part for well over $100 or something like that. Some folks, that's something that you're going to have to determine for yourself, right? Am I willing to spend the amount of money on a part that's no longer reproduced, or are they just produced in general anyways, in which case, that's what's up. But had I known at first that that part was well out of my price range to be reproduced and the other dude wasn't available on eBay, I'd have been hosed. Speaking of tech manuals and reproducible parts, I'm going to use the bandsaw for this next example, is finding stuff that's very reproducible, such as bearings. Right, so if you see my restoration video for this guy, you saw that I had to replace the bearing for the lower blade guide. And looking at the tech manual for this, if you go straight, serial number for that piece, it was like 20 bucks. And I was like, you know what, that's kind of discouraging for just a bearing. But looking at the inner diameter, outer diameter, and the width, I can take those specs, and I found a different person who sold them for basically 10 for 10, right? I get 10 bearings, $1 a piece, and I'm okay with that, right? Stuck it in there, it works just fine, everything's good. So that could also help you save a little bit of money as well. Last thing that's nice about these old tech manuals is that when you're talking about old machines, you need proper lubrication. That's what's highlighted right here. I got the specific weight of oil that I need for my scroll saw for this example, but another thing that you might run into as far as an older machine goes are lubricating wicks. And different machines have different widths or diameters of the wick that you might need. So make sure that you give that a go as well in case you need to replace those. Those are pretty easily replaceable. That's just another example I'm giving here. Now that we've talked about the different research techniques that I like to use, let's talk about the different places that I like to go in order to find the best deals. So you gotta start somewhere, right? And there is a big box store. We all know which one I'm talking about. They got cheap tools and they got a whole different myriad of different stuff that you can get into. But it is cheap and some people love it, some people hate it. It's a pretty good outlet in my opinion. I've got stuff from there. I keep going there. I don't really get too many big tools, big power tools, but you know, that is an option that you have at your disposal. I'm not really going to go into the weeds about Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace because there's a lot of other folks who go down deep into the idiosyncrasies of both. And for example, right, like Lincoln Street Woodworks talks about it very well, and I don't think I could add any more value to that. But that is obvious an option, right? Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace. Things that I deal with personally are like the first one, super obvious, right? Friends, family, coworkers. So friends and family, right? They might not have the passion anymore. They're getting older, they're moving, they just got out of it, whatever the case may be. They have tools, maybe you would like them, and chances are they'd probably give them to you for free as long as they know that you're going to give it the respect that the tools deserve, right? So Aunt Mary doesn't sew anymore, but she has a super awesome vintage sewing machine and all this awesome fabric that you want to start your fashion business. Well, if you just ask and they say, you know what, yeah, you can take all my stuff, take whatever you want, and you're like, whoa. Sometimes all it is, like the scariest part, is just asking, right? Maybe Aunt Mary's super strict and she's very stoic and you don't want to approach her very much, but she might be very passionate about the fact that she used to sew and she wants to pass it on to you. Or Uncle Bucky has a bunch of chisels and woodworking tools and you want to get into like making birdhouses or something. Like, yeah, dude, make birdhouses, bro. You know, it's cool, get it. I mean, I don't think Uncle Chucky's going to say that, but you get my point. Other thing is like the friends and coworkers. So chances are, same situation, right? I got my miter saw. You know who you are. I appreciate you. They said, yo, I got this contractor miter saw. I don't want it. It's just taking up valuable space. And I believe they upgraded too, right? So they're like, if you want it, it's yours. And it's like, yo, that's awesome, dude. Like, you name a time and place, I'll lug it across town. Next thing is growing popularity in my current situation are auction sites. Now, auction sites can go one of two ways, in person, online. They both have their pros and cons, but let's talk about the in-person one first. The biggest pro for the in-person is you can put your hands on the tools, right? They might be a convention center, theater, field, whatever the case may be. They rent a space, they set up booths, they set up tables. You go from place to place. Table one's got this, table two's got that. You don't want to buy a lot of gym cutting stuff, but maybe you want to buy a lot of like old wrenches, chisels, and a bandsaw or something like that, right? You can put your eyes on it, but the biggest con is that, like, so does everybody else, right? They're gonna put their hands on it. They know what's good, they know what's bad, and you can kind of gauge a feel for like what it is that you're getting into too, right? So let's say, for example, you want to bid on this bandsaw, and you've got, you know, this dude's got like bandsaw marks, he's cut himself. I don't know, maybe they're not that professional, but the point is like, they look and sound like they know what they're talking about, right? Eavesdrop the conversation, and they're like, this. Upper guide is this, bottom guide is this, inside tires, yada yada, motor, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, huh, that guy kind of knows what they're talking about. But they might also have a lot of money too. So you're prepared to go in and spend $200, that's what your budget is on a bandsaw. You're getting into the heat of the moment, 75 bucks, 80 bucks, 100 bucks, 150, 200, that's you, boom. And then, you know, Remus over there says 400, and you're like, getting into the heat of the moment, 450. And then Remus is just standing by, and you're like, ugh. I went more than double on my budget for this bandsaw that Remus kind of boned me on, because I don't even know if it's, you know, I don't know what he's talking about. You're getting into it. Maybe you do a little bit of research, but now you're stuck with it, right? They might have a grace period. You could probably talk to somebody and say, yo, you're going to be here next week as well. Can I just kind of take a pass on this? Again, ask the question. The worst they're going to say is no, but they might say, yeah, that's fine. We get it, right? The locals there, they might frequent the in-person auction, and again, they might have the stature, the reputation, and they're prepared to spend the money. Again, just be careful, don't get into the heat of the moment and then lose out on a bunch of stuff that you really didn't want in the first place. I've done it for online auctions personally. So online, obviously the biggest con of that is that you're at the whim of what the auctioneer wants to put out there as far as photos goes. Some are obviously better than others. They're going to take a picture of the bandsaw, the inside, the bottom, the blades, the upper guide, the lower guide, the motor, the stand, everything. And you're like, okay, beep. This looks good. This might need to be replaced. I might have to replace the blades, which you should probably, and so on and so forth. But there could also be the guys where all they do is say, bandsaw, as is, and the starting bid is like $1 and you've got a day left. Now, chances are online auctions are going to run for a few days. And do your research, because some of the other sites, they might have it to where, like, yes, the online auction is going for a week, but you could go to their establishment and check it out. So if that's the case, that's a con where you can kind of get the best of both worlds. You can go in there in person, check it out, and then make your bid afterwards. Ideally, what they will do is they'll take a picture of what the bandsaw is, and then you can just go online and do a search for vintage bandsaw or 1940s bandsaw, and then you can get a general idea as to what it is and whether or not you're willing to take that kind of a commitment for whatever kind of budget you want to spend on that. And then you might win, you might not. So again, be careful in the heat of the moment. Speaking of places where you can go put your hands on stuff, antique store. Now, this is kind of a double-edged sword in my opinion, because you go to these places and they slap antique, vintage, retro, these kind of buzzwords, and they add a 0 to the price tag, right? You want to get this 1930s screwdriver, you're thinking about spending $5-10 for it, and they want 50. Now granted, they're an antique store, they got to make money too. And usually it's going to be like a small shop or local business, and if you want to support them, absolutely, by all means do that. It's going to a good place, right? But just keep that in mind. Other places would be like flea market. Now, flea markets I used to go to as a kid to get like a bunch of like hand tools and stuff. And generally these folks, all they want to do is strike up a conversation, talk to like minds, and just get rid of stuff in bulk, right? You can spend $5 and get 30 files or 30 screwdrivers or something like that, right? Folks just want to pass it on. They just want to get rid of their stuff. But the folks that go from place to place to place, again, right? They might want to jack up the price and be like, yeah, these files are $5 each. And they're like, dude, these are old and dull. Like, what are you doing? The last thing are another obvious one, which are just local sales, right? Garage sales, estate sales, stuff like that. Now, I lump those two in together because they could go either way, right? It could be a situation where they want to get rid of all their junk, or it could be in a situation where I know what I got, I want to sell it, I don't care, I'm not going to budge, right? $200 for the bandsaw, you go into haggle for 50 and they said, no 200, no 200, no 200, no 200. And you're like, all right, you know what, I'm done talking to you, I'm out of here. My personal favorite are the moving sales, right? Because folks need to leave. So they want to get out of there and they want to get their junk out and get ready to pack light. So maybe they're going to retire, they want to go down to Texas, live out their best years and just die there someday. Or they're in the military and they've got orders and they need to leave and they've been stationed to whatever, South Carolina for the past 2 years, but now they got to go. Or whatever the case may be, right? So they're prepared to get rid of their junk, and they probably will take a little, they might take 50 bucks for the bandsaw because they just want to get it out of there and they can't lug, If they're going to go underway on a ship, you can't take a bandsaw on a sub. So the fourth one, and this might not be for everybody, and is, you've all heard the phrase, one dude's trash is another person's treasure. Yep. That's how I got this router table, because I saw this at the corner of my neighborhood, and it was kind of like a gray area. Is this dude getting rid of it or not? So I took it upon myself, knocked on the door, and I said, dude, what's up with that router table? You throwing that away? They said, yeah. And I said, can I ask why? And they said, oh, I just upgraded in my shop. So I moved my shop down the road. I have like an establishment now, and this is the one for my garage. I don't need it. It's just taking up space. I don't need two. And I said, oh man. The other thing that I found for free in the trash in my neighborhood, boom, was that guy. Trash day, I checked this out. It was stuck on the top of their lid. And I was like, why would they put the welder in the trash? And then I was like, you know what? I'm gonna take it now and I'm gonna ask questions later. And come to find out is that the spool on this thing was either left in the garage too long or not utilized. It was rained on, I don't know, but the flux core wire was stuck because it had rusted. Ooh, I know I said that the trash one was the last one, but I just thought of a fifth one. Fifth one would be make it yourself. I made a plastic press. Those things are super expensive to try to do from the ground up, and I did it using trash. The other thing too was the plastic shredder. Again, the actual paper shredder was destined for the trash, so I found that using resource number 4, but I don't know why I did bunny ears for that. So those are my resources, right? Friends, family, coworkers, auction sites, check out garage sales, estate sales, stuff like that. The obvious online ones like Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. Trash or do it yourself. Now you got to stick to your maintenance, right? You want to increase the longevity of these vintage machines or just the machines you got in general, right? You might go out and you might buy a brand new saw stop because you're prepared to make that purchase, right? But what I like to do is I like to, if I'm getting a vintage machine, like let's say this bandsaw here, right? If you go through that video, it talks about cleaning, right? Getting all the resin, the wood shavings, all this kind of stuff. Just give it a bath, just give it a makeover. And after that, now I start going into taking apart the individual pieces, making sure they're well lubricated, replacing any kind of oil like in the Dunlap scroll saw, and making sure that you replace any other pieces, parts like bearings, and definitely blades. So even though Homeboy did give me a saw blade and a brand new one, yes, I got 2 blades. One of them I had to ditch because some of the carbide pieces were broken off of them. So something that I do is I take and I create a little maintenance schedule just to refresh myself for the last time that I replaced the oil in my Dunlap scroll saw, or the last time that I sharpened my joiner blades, or how long ago did I purchase this bandsaw blade, right? Because people are like, yo, I got this new bandsaw, I got brand new blades, I'm good to go. And they start cutting stuff and all of a sudden they're figuring, man, this thing is, giving me issues. I gotta increase the tension. It's not cutting as well as it should be. Well, when was the last time you replaced the blades? Let's see, 2014, and it's 2022, right? Probably gonna need new blades. Or probably time for a sharpening of the joiner, so on and so forth. So making yourself a maintenance schedule, it kind of consolidates everything that you need to know from the tech manuals and just consolidating into one spot. I leave it right in the front of my shop so that I give it a glance every now and then just to make sure, once every 2 weeks, once a month, hey, when was the last time I did X, Y, Z? Another thing that I like to do, which is kind of handy for your maintenance sheet, not only is putting the dates the last time you did something, but also put that information for like model numbers and where you got replacement parts. That way you don't have to go digging for it in the tech manuals later. Another thing too is that sometimes I will put the model number if it has a placard on there, or after I do the internet search. That way I can find a comparable thing that's like, I'm not really sure if my Rockwell is the BS 880 or if it's the 890. I will ballpark it until I actually get a definitive name and model number. That way I just have it here for later whenever I have to look something up. So I kind of want to wrap up giving you some comparison for the time and the money that it takes to put into these machines, right? You have to do all the research. You have to check for replaceable parts and then replace them, clean them, ship them, whatever the case may be. Or I could just buy it brand new and have it shipped to me right out of the box, ready to go. So I looked up some comparable 14-inch bandsaws, and they range from like the lower quality looking ones for $500 all the way up to about $1,500. So let's just take the bottom of the barrel one that's 500 bucks, right? You get the bandsaw, you get the miter gauge, the stand, and one blade. That seemed pretty standard package for a brand new machine. So let's say 500 bucks. This one, I had to get the machine, which was 150, plus take the gas and the time to go out and get it. So for me, it wasn't right down the road. It was 45 minutes there, load it, 45 minutes back. So you got the gas situation. And nowadays it's, but anyways, had to replace the bandsaw tires. This was another 30 bucks. The tension spring in the back, that was another 30 bucks. The bearings here and there, a couple dollars, you know, give or take. And I got 3 new blades from Timberwolf, which was 60 plus shipping, which was another 20 bucks, so we'll just say 80. So putting all those monies together, you're looking at around $300. So 300 compared to 500 or 1500 for like the Grizzly or whatever, you know what I mean? But is it worth that time? That's the other thing you got to think about. I mean, personally, I don't really mind that because I like getting the manuals. I like taking these things apart, cleaning them, because then I get a better feel for it. It's like a personal connection with the machine. Like, I know how this piece works. I know how the other pieces work. I see how they all fit together to perform this function. And I can also see what the most susceptible piece is that could die later on down the line. Like for, let's say, for example, right, the tilt clamp on the table saw. Everything else in there, in the carriage and all the linkage and everything, made out of metal. For whatever reason, the tilt clamp was made out of plastic. Now I got an aluminum one, so even better, right? Now it's all metal. But that's just something that you got to factor in, right? This is your own personal choice. Time and money, what are you willing to put forth? Me? I'm good with cheaper if I got to put in a little elbow grease. So these are the methods that I utilize in order to research tools that I can get on the cheap that are also going to be effective for my shop. So hopefully I gave you the right resources where you can confidently do the same and make those purchases yourself. And if you're trying to build up a small shop like I did, I use a one-car garage, but I make it work. I got another video that I talk about how to optimize your space and plan accordingly. So if you give that a look, I'd really appreciate it. Other than that, that's all I got for this one. So I'll hit you up on the next one. Peace.